Okay, here we are in turn painting to scales. Now you might be thinking, what was all that work for? Well, I wore out a nib on a Wacom pen doing the painting. Here's the end result. We've got these very distinct areas that we can selectively mask with mask by polypaint. I think I'm going to show you what the tileable alphas can do on these purple areas first. Here is in white, just to show you how distinct and sharp the edges are. It helps that the model's 20+ million polys. That way the poly paint has got a nice definition on the edges. Okay, so back to red wax. I'm going to jump in with mask by poly paint, zoom in. The higher poly your model, the more clunky this window is. Get him in position and grab one of these swatches to the right. Let's land on this purpley area. Hit OK, and it's masked. Zoom up to the Z tool and just turn off polypaint and invert the mask. Now this is when we can start to use the tileable alphas. These areas I've highlighted that are unmasked at the moment are incredibly flexible parts of the T-Rex. So I'd like them to have a distinctly different look to the rest of the head. Now there is an alpha already loaded in, and I've highlighted it alpha by UV. If you turn the UV off, it just kind of projects onto the surface. And you get an effect that's okay, but you don't get the strength of the project by UV. Okay, so remember in UV we can play with these settings, we can make it stronger. And it only updates on your main model after you've hit OK. I'm just going to play about with a few different alphas to show you how they work. Change the scale. You see absolutely no tiling effect there. It just, there's no seams. And it conforms really nicely to the surface of the model. I'm not sure what to pick on this one. Change the strength. If you find you're not getting enough strength using the slider, you can turn the relative button on and it really ramps up the detail. Hit OK and zoom in on your model and have a look. Now you might see a nasty transition line there between the texture and the shadow. It won't exist once we've applied it to mesh. Let's try a few more. Scale it about. That's too distinctly crocodilian for me. Let's try. Again, that's too distinct. May end up going back with the first one. This is a softer version of that crocodilian belly pattern one. But again, it might not transition well to the painted scales we did. Don't set yourself rules as well, experiment. Constantly play about. What I've done there is I did hit apply to mesh to see how it works. And Zbrush will just crunch the numbers for a couple of minutes while it does this. So just be patient, and if you ever see the blue circle of death, you step back from Zbrush. Right, that's how it's applied it. I'm not entirely happy with that, so Control Z it away. Back into Noisemaker. Let's pick another one. This one's not bad. With a bit of strength. Apply to mesh. Let Zbrush do the thinking. And obviously the higher poly your model, the longer this process takes. And there's the blue circle of death. Just drop your tablet and pen, just sit back, sit on your hands while it processes. You do not want to play with anything while Zbrush is thinking. Right, so I've just cleared the mask to look how it sits on the surface. It's not too bad at all. Now the masking isn't lost, of course, because we use mask by polypaint. So turn RGB back on. We can pick another area to do. Okay. Position your model. We're going to tackle this eye area. So we're colour swatching on the red. Back over and turn RGB off and invert. Let's try a tileable one from here. Back to Noisemaker. That's the previous alpha, it's remembered it. So let's have a look what we can do with it. Remember the logic that the skin on this eye area is incredibly flexible, so the scales will be small. They can't be big chunky scales, or you'd never be able to move his eyelids. Let's try something different. This one. Now it's not updated in the main window, it's updated in the smaller window, so be aware of that. Is this the time to use this one? Just change the scale. It's quite nice because it's following the flow of the geometry as well. Ramp up the strength. Hit OK and have a look. It's kind of okay. Let's try this one. No, I like this one. You can add additional noise at this stage with the slider above the one I'm using. But that's something I prefer to add at the end if it needs more interest. That's not bad because see, the tileable alpha followed the stretched UVs there, the stretched geometry. We've got a nice bulging larger scales at the bottom of the eyelid. So apply to mesh, let Zbrush think. And that's not bad, I'm happy with that. Okay. Let's have a look. You could nip in now and just tweak some details, go damn standard, and just push these scales about. Re-emphasize these wrinkles and folds. Switch between this brush and inflate. And again, if I was doing this for a commercial job, I could spend a day just on this area. You have no idea what the final viewer of your work is going to look for and look at. So over to inflate. We're just adding back some weight to these folds and wrinkles. Okay, it's not bad. So, RGB back on, let's pick another area. And I am rushing like crazy, even though this has been slightly speeded up to demonstrate. This whole project is a speed sculpt for me. But in the past I was so lazy. I'd just drag alphas over the surface and just hope that would be good enough. Because in my eyes at the time it was good enough, but it wasn't. Again, we're through that process again, where we've selected the blue scales with mask by poly group, turned off RGB, and we've inverted the mask. And I've jumped straight in here with the inflate brush. And the trick to this process, and it is speeded up a great deal, is to just tease your pen over the surface very lightly, inflate until you can't see the gaps between the scales. Actually push it slightly higher than you think it should be, because we will be affecting this a bit further. But this is where the pre-planning came on board, with the wrinkles, the folds, all the detail work we did on the poly painting. And we're already getting something here, but we're going to take it a stage further in a moment or two. Okay, just check we've got everything on this first pass. And now, with smooth and very, very gentle strokes, we're just reopening up the gaps between the scales. It's a quite dramatic effect, and it looks quite spherized and ballooned, but there's another trick I'll show you soon. Just tease the surface. Here we're going crazy fast mode again. Can you see the value of the poly painting and masking now? Don't get fixated on small parts, do it as a process pass. Loads of different types of smooth brushes in Zbrush, so I suggest you have an experiment. I'm just using the standard at the moment. So this is like the first pass using smooth, just to reopen those scale patterns. Check you've got everything. I'm just going in and starting to bump up some of these details. It's almost too soon to do that, but I can't help myself. Okay, now there was a transition between the two parts of texturing, so if you invert the mask, you can nip over to inflate. Just tease out this surface. Add some extra weight where that soft, fleshy, scaly skin overlaps the harder place. And there's so much you can do with this masking and inflate technique, especially with the combination of the mask by polypaint. Thinking veins on creatures, all sorts of things. And this is a process I started using about 10 years ago, and it's one of those ones, the more effort you put in at the start, the better the results. So I'm just teasing with the inflate brush. Don't go too far. Just so that transition is so physically real when you look at it. Okay. It's a nice fleshy bulge. Again, when I demo this process in studios, there's a collective, I get it, at this point. All this information on your high poly, if it does go through the substance painter process, all the information is there. Okay, so clear the mask, have a look. Not bad. Just switch it to a different material just to get an idea and see it with fresh eyes. Okay, H polish. This, if you do it very lightly, just knocks back that balloon effect. And you get this really weathered, polished scale effect. And again, keep switching back to some gentle smoothing, because this brush can actually knock the detail back completely. You don't really want that. I think we're really starting to get a really nice grown, lizardy, reptilian look now. So it's H polish and inflate again, a little bit smoothing. Okay. Now I'm on a clay build-up, and I've picked one of the existing alphas in Zbrush. Just rather than the square shape, which is too harsh, I'm using this noisy little alpha just to build up the scales. These are almost bony plates, they're almost like scoots. Crocodiles have scoots, so it's wrong to say that a dinosaur would have a scoop. They're almost like scales that have grown too big and hard and defensive. And again, the little features that your eyes are drawn to. Okay. Just pick out these. I think I will do a separate pass of additional detail on these, because again, brushing like crazy. These are the little details that will catch the light at render time. Okay, it's not looking too bad. Right, mask by polypaint again. See what we've got. That's the yellow of the nostril. Turn off RGB. And you've got options here. You could go in with one of the tileable alphas, or you could just drag the alphas on the surface. Keep experimenting, don't you set yourself any rules. If you've got too many rules and too much pre-planning, it just becomes a process. It just needs to be creative and fun. Again, this is incredibly fleshy material. This will be moving constantly. And here I'm just experimenting with multiple passes of different alphas. It's kind of looking too applied for me. Yeah. I think control that Z that away. Again, it's constant experimentation. No, I'm not happy with that. I think we would have dragged some alphas. Standard brush with drag rectangle. See what we got. All right. So, mask by polypaint. Colour swatch the red wax material. And all of the other colours. So, in essence, we've inverted the mask and we've left the red wax at the top of the head exposed. This is masked by lasso just to protect the areas we don't want to affect with an alpha. Make sure we've got everything. Drop out of perspective mode. It's going to help. Okay. So back to the standard masking brush. We're just masking the top of the head. This area behind the ear. Right, let's try an alpha on the top of the head. Because we're masking with UVs, there is a seam on the UVs across the top of the head, so it could be time to turn UV off. Go for standard projection and see what that does. We can always fix that seam very quickly at the end. There are always options. No, it's too crocodilian. This is projecting the tileable alpha without UVs, and you've lost the seam in the middle. But that's dependent on the look of it in the window where you're assigning the UV and the alpha. See what we get with this. Now, let's just have a preview and I'll show you what I mean about the projection without UVs. It's stretching like crazy at the back of the model because we projected it at the surface of this viewport. So back to UVs. Hit the relative button and just play with the strength. That's not bad. Apply to mesh and let Zbrush do the numbers for you. Okay, it's a little bit harsh. We can knock that back slightly. In the next video though, we do some finessing of the details, fix a few of the little mistakes that have come through, and we'll texture the body. So, I'll see you soon.